Good morning, everyone. Episode number 4, Dr. Beau Show, talking about the macro, meso, and micro environments of health. When I just sat down here, we got all this fancy lighting and everything now. I got my notes. I felt like Ron Burgundy a little bit. My hair's almost getting there. So, anyways, we did part 1 of human de-evolution last time, talking about basically the death of blue-collar society, the blue-collar worker, and how that's feeding into the overall de-evolution of Homo sapiens. And that sounds really scary and just like a big idea, right? But what I want to talk about today is if we think we're de-evolving, so we're changing, and that doesn't necessarily mean, I'm saying de-evolving because evolving usually is survival of the fittest. It may be survival of the most unfit now, because that's the way that things are going to maybe go as far as like nanotechnology, biotechnology. So what I want to talk today is, what are the components that are going to lead to that overall? What are the environmental factors that lead to the de-evolution of a human? And we have our macro, and basically shell of health would be the earth, our global environment. The meso, or that kind of middle ground, would be our house, where we live, the people we immediately surround ourselves with. And then the micro, or the personal, would be yourself. Basically the things that are going on within you, but then also how you perceive and take in all of the things from the macro and meso environmental factors. So I drew these stupid little pictures, but this, if you can see this is how it does work, right? The earth, our environment, is far bigger than the homes that we live in, which are far bigger yet than us, right? So you got macro, meso, and micro. Alas, most people today, very egocentric society for the most part, I won't say everybody, this is what we actually think it looks like. So we think about ourselves a lot. We really like a nice house, right? Mainly Western society. Some people don't have the luxury of these things. And then the earth overall kind of gets left behind, and we think of that very little, right? Even though we're a speck on this giant rock, it's kind of funny where our perspective lies. And I've talked a lot about mindset and perspective and how that needs to change, because if it doesn't, like, good luck. We're just going to keep going down the path we're going. And like I said, I don't know if that's bad or good. It's just, it is what it is right now. It's happening. So I broke this down into 5 parts, and it kind of sounds like Captain Planet a little bit. It's air, water, a little different than Captain Planet now, light, land, which could also mean materials. We're talking about houses, and then energy. And that's where we're going to get a little weird at the end. So let's dive right into this thing. So a lot of these things are common sense, but I'm going to try to bring the health, basically, impact to you guys. So as far as our air quality, our overall environment, think of everything from I need to go back to life sciences, but basically going from our stratosphere, exosphere, all of that stuff, all the way down to the ground. Everything that's made this earth a livable space for multiple kinds of organisms, starting with prokaryotes billions of years ago, and we're not having the evolution debate on here, right? Different video, all the way up until us, who are filled with prokaryotes, eukaryotes, and a bunch of other stuff. But that environment, believe it or not, is extremely delicate, even though it has such a biodiverse variety of life. But what we've seen over the past maybe 2 centuries, but then really sped up in maybe the last 2 to 3 decades, is obviously an increase in pollution, an increase in temperature. And now we're gonna get somebody on here, and that's fine, because like I said, question everything, find your truth. When I say that, make sure that you throw your truth against science. So if we have somebody out there that says, I don't think the temperature is increasing, I don't think that there are greenhouse gases being trapped within the environment, and then I don't think the air quality is being depleted, go look at data. I don't know why people think that like climate change is propaganda. I mean, if you think that solar panel manufacturers or Elon Musk or wind farm manufacturers are like profiteers off this thing, like there's still such a minuscule portion of the energy grid. I don't know why everybody thinks that's propaganda. If it was electoral propaganda, I don't get that either. Anyways, doesn't matter. That stuff is changing, and if you don't believe that, there's other stuff to look at. Did you know that one of the biggest markets in Japan right now is like indoor air purification? So most, and I think almost all, if not all, the baseball fields, soccer fields, tennis courts, even people's back patios and porches in Japan are being built in basically what would look like a greenhouse or atrium almost. And there's air purification systems because the air is so bad they can't even go outside without a mask on. It used to be you had the choice of going out without a mask on or not, and now it's kind of not a choice. They almost have to go outside. So this market is huge. I think it's one or two of the biggest emerging markets out of Japan, and now it's going to start going international. But that's crazy when you think about it, which that's only making the environment worse because now you're pumping out anything that was bad or detrimental from these micro environments back into the macro environment. So it's almost like we're condensing or concentrating the crap air on the environment. Crazy stuff to think about. Now, if you take that down, right, we got the environmental pollution, we got increased temperature, global warming, whatever you want to call it, take that down to the meso level. So think about your home. We moved into a new house not too long ago, and when Sloan and I moved in there, we were getting, I mean, this is no joke, like we'd go into the house and we'd have headaches, we'd have red eyes, like we didn't know what was going on. We thought it was the dog, allergies. So we had a friend that's a home inspector come, and he checked everything as far as like gases and everything, said it was fine. And then we talked to another friend of ours that is a HVAC professional, and he was kind of like, you know, the construction is so good nowadays that basically they seal these houses up and they have really good ventilation as far as the HVAC goes, but as far as like cross ventilation of open air, they tend to trap CO2, and as the CO2 like parts per million go up, that's not a great environment for a human to live in particular, a child to live in. And what are you going to get? You're going to get fatigue, brain fog, headaches, red eyes, things like that. We're yet to test that. We should look at it. The thing is, with the house that we're in, built, I believe, in the 80s, which is when they started to tighten everything up, and we thought, yeah, man, we're doing a great job. We're insulating the houses. We did too good of a job. We don't get outside ventilation, which we need natural air, but also this house has shuttered windows that you can't really open because there's no screen. So you have to think about the air that's in your home, right? And we know that we should be flushing our ventilation systems. You get a good HVAC guy or gal. Cleaning your air filters. There's all sorts of things that go into this, and it's not just cleaning that stuff out, because you could still be pumping gases or particulate matter through your house. Obviously, everybody knows that you got to check emissions of like carbon monoxide, and now we have radon detectors and all these things. So that's all good and well, but it's also when we're exposed to natural sunlight, natural air, that is far better than these false environments that we put ourselves when we're indoors all day. The other thing that we want to think of, and this isn't really air quality, but I want to throw it under this category, was electromagnetic radiation. So we're getting a ton of this stuff every day now, and this isn't weirdo like fringe science stuff. Like, this has been studied over and over now, that with all of our Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, whatever it is, like we're constantly being bombarded by EMR, EMFR, wavelength radiation, and we don't quite know how detrimental it is. We think it's detrimental, it would make sense, but a lot of people are starting to design kill switches for Wi-Fi in their houses. So instead of turning the Wi-Fi off on your phone, like you're still broadcasting Wi-Fi through your house. So people will create a kill switch. They don't have to go unplug their router, their router or modem, and now they can cut off the Wi-Fi, like in particular when we go to bed at night, so we're not being bugged by that stuff. Yeah, big shout out to CK. And then, so that's a big one, Bluetooth. So make sure when you're going to sleep at night, especially, which we would rather you not, but if you use your phone as an alarm clock, make sure you're putting it on night mode. We want to, or airplane mode, so we shut off Bluetooth and Wi-Fi and all that stuff. So then we got to think about air quality and things that are in the environment and how we're changing like the O2, CO2 balance, nitrogen balance in the environment, how that's going to start to affect plant life and eventually human life, because all things kind of start at the plant level, even if you're a carnivore. So just, no pun intended, food for thought on how just air quality, which like air quality and the rising temperature, we're going to talk about how that's affecting other things. But this is a big deal because more and more, like we do a lot of stuff with breathing in my clinic, and we see a lot of people that have, you know, whether it's an obstructive or restrictive breathing disorder. We see a lot more asthma in our environment or in our population. We see a lot more allergies. Part of that may be due to what we're eating, right? So how nutrition is being affected because the food quality is going down, but also air quality. You put those two together, it's not scary by any means yet, but it's worrisome that the air quality overall, like this isn't me throwing an opinion out. I mean, travel to a big city, they have like basically pollution or smog alerts. You know, you got your yellow, green, red when we lived in St. Louis, and some days you weren't supposed to go out and run. That's crazy. That didn't happen when I was a kid. Right? And now we're getting more forest fires due to increased temperature and things like this. So our air is changing every day. Right? So there's macro, there's meso, micro. We're going to talk about at the end on all this stuff. So how it affects us personally and what's going on physiologically. So water. This is a fun one to talk about, and we can talk about this for days. So I hope everybody knows that the water that we're getting from rainfall, ocean water, lakes, rivers is all acidifying a bit, which a big portion of that, and come at me climate, non-climate change believer people, whoever you are, I'm guessing that you believe the earth is flat as well and that the lunar eclipse the other day or solar eclipse shouldn't have been possible then. Anyways, but rising temperature causes acidification of the water, along with some other things, us putting a lot of things into the water table that shouldn't be there. Rising water table overall, which I will leave that up for debate on whether we are actually melting the polar ice caps or if we're just reaggregating ice in different areas, and if this is part of the natural cycle. So Ryan just said, I think there's been a strong connection reported between EMR, ELF, and leukemia, etc. in children. Do you have any good sources for and regarding the micro EMF we get from our cell phones? And I can't read the rest of the message on these when I'm live. Yeah, I do. And I'll put up some research sources and some other books and stuff on that for sure. So we got rising water table, which changes a lot of livable spaces, which is going to condense an already overpopulated earth. Acidification, so the water that is falling from the sky that usually goes through the natural like filtration cycle is coming down more acidic and with more particulate matter. The way that we treat our water is we have to treat it more harshly than we used to because we have things like xenoestrogen, so basically hormones that are being put into the system due to people peeing out birth control and different things. There's a lot of antibiotics in our water system, especially in the US, because we're taking so much antibiotics as a society and then peeing these into the water table. Heavy metals, partially because of things that exist in the environment in total, but then also large corporations. And I don't know if you saw the big thing about the other day about basically nuclear waste and how we're actually getting rid of these things instead of just keeping them in cooling ponds. But we're just realizing that we may have thought we could take a little more advantage of the earth than we thought, as far as putting waste in certain places and burying things, putting things in the water. And what we're realizing is that we're having a far bigger impact than we ever realized. And then we got to think about scarcity of water. I think it was South America. I don't know if it was Brazil. A company out of South America ran these basically like futuristic ads showing products that they think would exist in the future world. And one of them was water, purified water. One of them was, I think, like a apple sauce that was like 5% apple. The rest wasn't, and that was like fresh. And basically just creating awareness of like things that could really become plausible as we go further down this pathway. And then obviously this is going to affect farming, right? So now we start bringing it down to home. when the water table changes, we have more pollutants in the water, more of this stuff. We have more livestock putting all sorts of literally crap into the water table. We wonder why the nutrition level and overall quality of produce, and then back into meat if you eat meat, like all of these things are being affected, and we got to stop turning a blind eye to it. Like it's just not smart, and I don't know how anybody can get away with just saying, I don't think that's true. And if you do think it's true, like, how do you go about your day doing the exact same stuff you've always done if you do think it's true? That's what's crazy to me. So now you take that down to the mesocycle or the meso environment, like your home. So we talk about water. One thing to watch is we don't want to be drinking a lot of water out of plastic bottles. We think that bottled water is better. I think most people out there know now that it really only has to be tap water to pass quality tests to be bottled. The thing is, you get a lot of, even if it's BPA free, you still get a lot of the plastics, because that's a petroleum-based product, plastic is, right? So you're going to leach that into the water. So I heard somebody say the other day, it's like drinking plastic tea. Especially, which most people know this too, when you leave water in a plastic bottle, in particular like your cheap, squeaky, kind of crunchy plastic bottles in your car or in the heat, like you're going to get more of that tea effect and more leaching of any of that petroleum or basically an oil byproduct into the water, which is no bueno. These are hormone disruptors, all sorts of nasty stuff, and a lot of them we don't even know 100% what they do. But then we talk about, okay, well, we should purify our water if our water quality is not that great coming into our house. Yes, but how you're going about that purification process is a big deal. So most of the time, we're going to go maybe to the store and we buy a Brita filter. A Brita filter is a micron carbon filter. So it's taking out particulate matter, it's taking out protozoa, bacteria, things like that. But when the water that you drink that comes out of a Brita filter, when we get done with it, it's almost equivalent to like a net neutral water. So we lost all of the stuff that could really harm us. We've also lost all the stuff that could help us. So trace minerals, any sodium or chloride, except the chloride that it got treated with from the water treatment plant. And we still probably have some of those hormones in there because those are a little bit different as far as how we have to filter them out. There are a lot of different filtration systems out there. Really fancy ones from your Kangen water to your reverse osmosis. But what you got to realize, even when you get a really good filtration system, so say you got a like $3,000 in-home reverse osmosis filtration system, that is still usually net neutral water. So what people are starting to get hip to now is we realize when we have something like a base mineral crystalline structure, sea salt, and we put that in water in a glass bottle or tube, and we let it sit in sunlight, we get a catalyzing reaction, the release of some of these trace minerals into the water. You need those trace minerals to be able to hang on to the water. If you drink net neutral water all day, that's almost like drinking distilled water. And I see I got some colleagues from chiropractic school on here. If anybody remembers when Iggy, our physiology teacher, was talking about distilled water and how people thought that was healthier, if you drank that for 3 days in a row, you'd probably die because you're not able to absorb and you're actually pulling water out of your, basically you're changing the polarity of the water and you're not able to hang on to it. So you actually dehydrate yourself, which is insane. But that being said, letting water, so people now will have a tubular system where the water basically goes outside or gets UV interaction while it passes through a transparent, tubing system. You could easily get a glass bottle, a glass of water, put some sea salt in it, let it sit out in sunlight for 30 seconds. You're going to get a lot of that good stuff, as crazy as that sounds. But think about what would be happening with water if you got it from a stream, which you can't do anymore. That has basically been interacting with minerals, or think about a true spring, right? So spring water, that's going from a deep, an artesian or a rock well. The deeper usually the better. Sometimes you can get too much minerals, which can cause issues like kidney stones and different filtration issues in the human. But as that water comes back up through that spring, it's picking up minerals from the rocks and things around it. We need that stuff. So we shouldn't be filtering out. If we are filtering out, we got to figure out how to put it back. Obviously, water quality is going to affect nutrition. You put contaminated water on produce, you grow it, you wash it with it, what do you think you're going to get? I mean, this stuff is no brainer, but I want to lay out the whole landscape of this stuff. So maybe, hopefully, I don't care if it's one person thinks differently about this stuff. So light, as in this, again, maybe debatable, as the ozone is becoming thinner and we're having less protection from certain wavelengths and spectrum of light coming from the sun, basically we're going to have a harsher reaction or harsher UV rays. Crazy thing is, where do you get the majority of the water you personally drink? I'll talk about that here towards the end, Ryan, when I talk about personal health. So we are in a very overall vitamin and mineral deficient society just due to diet and quality of life and basically the way we live our lives in general. It's funny that we're, for the most part, vitamin D deficiency and magnesium deficiency are two of the biggest ones, especially in the US. And vitamin D, most people know that you can get it from the sun. We've talked about this a little bit before. You have to have some precursors to be able to absorb vitamin D from the sun. You have to have vitamin E, you have to have vitamin A, you have to have vitamin K. If you don't have those, it makes it really hard to absorb it through your skin because it's basically, you pick up vitamin D through your skin. It's a cholesterol. You have to have certain things. Vitamin D is a hormone. All these things are necessary before you can get it. But the thing is, especially the last maybe 10 years, we really demonized sunlight, and we saw, I'm not being racist here, everybody's seen him, the Asian golfer out there in like a white suit from head to toe with gloves, like, they look like, what is it, was it Raiden off Mortal Kombat or whatever? But like, you can't see any part of their skin. Well, no bueno, right? You need sunlight. And then here came sunscreen, right? And we lathered everybody up in sunscreen. Funny thing is, they found out a lot of the reactions between sunlight and the sunscreen itself was actually causing more of a carcinogenic effect than the sunlight itself. And what we're probably not doing enough of is basically, over time, getting our skin used to ultraviolet light, right? So what do? We just go out and burn, we cook, so we get a lot of free radical oxidation reaction in our skin versus titrating and getting used to it over time, so we build up a tolerance to sun because we used to live outside before we had houses, right? So we had to do these things. What do people that live in a very harsh environment do? We see tribes people that cover themselves in mud just like animals would. So there also is a limit, right? But a lot of that has to do with how we're dissipating heat and the insects. It's not just about the UV light that can be damaging us, and the more we find out, the more we don't think that is damaging, right? So plant life may start to change as we change the O2, CO2, nitrogen balance. I wouldn't say that's happening a lot right now, but that may be why we're seeing that things are easier now. Like, obviously the soil's changing, which is part air, part light, part water. That being said, like, think of all of these hydroponics, we're not just talking marijuana here, that are, hydroponic farms that are popping up, and how much easier it is to grow because you're basically controlling the environment. So there's going to be a lot of changes from a technology standpoint with farming as we go down this road. Again, just bringing this stuff up. If you guys have questions, ask as we're going. Now bring the light into your home, right? So I'm sitting under these dimmable halogen lights here. We live in very unnatural environments, in particular when it comes to air quality, temperature, and lighting. So we can stay up all night long because we have lights in our house. We could sleep all day long because we could keep it dark and shut out the light. That's not how our diurnal clock works, or basically how our hormones and everything that regulates our circadian rhythms. That's not how we work, right? We were meant to wake up to sunlight, and sunlight in particular, that spectrum of light kind of stimulates the pineal gland to start helping release cortisol from some areas. We also need dark to help basically start releasing 5-HTP and melatonin to help us go to sleep and stay asleep. And when we don't do that, or we get, there's different harsher kinds of lights and all that stuff, we're going to start messing with our physiology, our hormones, and all these things. And I'm sure you guys have heard some of this stuff. And this is a big area, right? Because we spend a lot of time in front of things like this that put off a blue spectrum of light. And I know you guys have heard blue spectrum of light is going to be stimulating, right? So it's going to keep us up at night. It also changes the brainwave pattern a little bit. So when we think about kids that are on iPads from an early age, there's some scary stuff going on there. So light is a big deal. So think of like good cross ventilation, good natural water, good natural light, right? There's a lot of lighting companies now and a lot of home builders and remodelers that go after, we're going to talk about this idea at the end a little bit, biomimicry, right? That we're using what nature's done well for a long time, right? So we look at, you think about biomimicry, kind of the idea of it has been around for thousands of years, but think of the Wright brothers. They started to design the wings of their first plane after birds, right? And then we think about like how we designed solar panels came from butterflies' wings, right? Like when we pull things from nature, we usually do pretty good. But we need to start mimicking our home building more like the environment, and we're going to be far better off because, like I said, we lived outside for a very long time, and now we're in these very controlled, unnatural environments. As far as the spectrum, so a lot of people are really bugged by fluorescent lighting. Fluorescent lighting is basically going through cycles, right? So as a fluorescent light wears out, you can actually see it blinking. Fluorescent light is constantly turning on and off. I remember I had a friend in undergrad, Drew, if you're listening, he could not be in a room with the fluorescent light because for whatever reason, he could actually hear or sense the light on and off, and it would literally drive him nuts. But fluorescent lighting is very harsh. It's very detrimental to like focus and learning, and think about what's in our schools. So we were adamant that when we got here that we were not going to have fluorescent lighting. Halogen is a good choice. Being able to dim light so you can follow, as you go through the day. You can get way down this rabbit hole. There's people that this is all they do, right? So again, just bringing up some stuff. Land. So air, water, light, land. Our powers combined, Captain Planet. So land. Watched a really cool documentary the other night, Chasing Coral. I suggest you watch it if you got Netflix, basically talking about the dying coral reefs. I hope you've heard about this. The Great Barrier Reef is almost gone. Large in part, and this again, not my opinion, due to research and study, due to the acidification of the ocean, right? So it's changing the environment that these things live in. Deforestation. We're big old dummies and we just keep tearing down trees faster than we can grow them. New construction. So this one kills me. I do understand that we're continually getting more and more people in this world. But what's crazy to me is like here in Birmingham in particular, where we're from, you'll see some of these new developments. I'm not a huge fan of, like, I'll just be honest, the places that like Signature Homes or whatever it is, they go out here, cross cut a whole place, put in these little box homes, one right next to the other, and then they go back in, they go to a nursery, buy trees for maybe $500 to $3,000 a pop, replant them, smaller, more juvenile trees where we had trees that put off far more O2 and take in far more CO2, have a bigger root system which creates water filtration. Like, we're idiots, guys. And what do we also need when we create new construction? We need materials for the house itself. So we're destroying land, we're creating material, or we have to basically use materials to do that. But what's crazy is like we just keep moving around, right? And an entire neighborhood will die off, and then you'll have a new subdivision. Like, we need to get in, like, recycling. The idea of recycling has been around for a long time, right? You got your bin, you put your aluminum can in it. How about recycling homes, right? How about we create some sort of subsidy program where when you level a house and put a new one on it, maybe if we're going to throw all this socialist money at people, throw it at people to actually do something good and rebuild on the plot, and then throw another, tax advantage at people for using sustainable materials. The materials that you use for your home are a big deal, right? The way that they, where we get our lumber, how we treat the lumber, the different, plastics and ceramics that go into a house, like the chemicals in these things, right? So think about like new construction. So we're tearing up land, and crazy little statistics. By the year 2050, there's supposed to be 10 billion people on the earth. That's another short of 3 billion from today. That's, you want to talk about scary stuff. Where are you going to put all those people? Probably Mars. Come on, Elon. But when we're building homes, we need to be thinking about the materials, for the environment at large, macro, but also when you get things in your home, like certain kinds of paint, like oil-based paints, Obviously, we knew we've had to figure out the whole lead thing was basically making us a little weird upstairs. Different kinds of treated lumber, carpet is a huge one. All of these things emit different kinds of toxins and off-gas different things. In particular, like down to the bedding you use, the carpet is a big one. Like, I don't know what the off-gas period is typically for your like standard carpet, but I think it's like 5 years before you're like kind of at the end of the end of the life of carpet, giving off whatever crap like formaldehyde and all the other stuff that they use to treat it. So we also want to think about like what our body needs from a health standpoint, like what our foot is coming into contact with, right? From a movement standpoint, lighting when we're using materials, like the windows that we're going to put in, how we treat the windows, right? To see what kind of spectrum of light can get through, because believe it or not, we can get an argon-filled window, which is the gas that's in between the two panes. That's going to block out a certain spectrum of light, and that may not be a great thing. So we need to think about these things, and if you're lucky enough to be building a house, that means you have enough money to build a house. So it doesn't cost that much money to hire a consultant or hire a company that is eco-savvy or sustainably conscious, and it's a big deal, right? So like I said, if you know these things to be true and you're thinking about them and you're not acting on them, like shame on you, right? And that's what this whole talk's about. I hope you guys know most of this stuff, but if you don't, hopefully we're roping it all together and getting you to think about it one more time. And then maybe more from an aesthetics issue, but also from like a mental health standpoint, we should be building into the landscape. So I talked about cross-cutting and then replanting. Humans have lived in the environment for hundreds and thousands of years, and now we're destroying the environment and landscape, rebuilding it. That affects our psyche. Like, we're meant to, like, why do you think people like getting outside for the most part, except, you know, kids under 10 years old? Like, kick them out of the house, make them go do something. People like getting outdoors because there's a lot of beneficial, like both health and mental health aspects to getting outside, right? We need kids to play in the dirt. We need them to get good air. We need them to get good light. So build your house into the landscape best you can. Keep the big trees. Keep the water table better. Keep the air purity better. And just from an aesthetic standpoint, if you're happy, and that's one of the things we're going to talk about here at the end, if you're happier to live in your house because it seems beautiful, and if beauty to you is a big concrete palace on a plot of land with no trees, more power to you, but you probably got something going on upstairs we don't want to talk about anyways. That's just my opinion on that one. That is opinion. No science on that one. I don't know, maybe Freud had something on it. But energy. So let's talk about the woo-woo part of this. And I'm not talking the electricity that's around your house, even though you could have dirty electricity. We could talk about that with the EMF thing, Ryan. Dirty electricity is basically like EMF that's being put off by appliances or outlets that are active even when the appliance is not. So it eats energy, and then it's also putting off a certain wavelength of radiation. But if we think about the environment, we see all of these, the increased amount of forest fires and flooding and the climate change and storms. So there are a lot of maybe negative things that are occurring. What I tell people all the time, we had this discussion at my parents' house this weekend. A really interesting book, I brought this up last time, called Homo Deus. So in this book, the author talks a lot about how we're actually in a much better place nowadays than we were even maybe a couple decades ago, but definitely when you take like the last century. So things like starvation, war, crime are all far down from where they were even a few decades ago. But if you turn on the news at night, that's not what you think. You think the world's ending tomorrow, right? And I'm not denying that there's bad stuff going on out there. What you got to realize is all of the media is putting a focus on the negative aspects of the environment at large, meso, and then also micro. So individual crap like Kim Kardashian's butt or something. But what we should realize is that negativity spins us out. That comes into the home. That's what we talk about. And there's your energy overall, right? So things are better from a humanity standpoint. We have less crime. We have less famine. We may be feeding more people with maybe crap food, different issue. But what we should realize is that negativity is spinning out of control. But the thing that is funny to me, the Weather Channel is talking about all these weather changes and climate change, and Nat Geo's talking about it. The thing that's probably going to be the most detrimental, these environmental changes, is the thing that gets put up as like, oh, we don't believe in it. It's probably not true. And the things that we talk about the most, that we think like war, nuclear war, those things haven't happened since World War II, right? And there's a good reason for it, because most people realize that if we pull the trigger on that, nobody's going to be around. So we have almost blockades put in place from a human standpoint to not kill ourselves with weapons of mass destruction. Yet we keep going about our daily business, which is going to slowly kill us, not the earth, right? That's what we got to realize. All of these initiatives for protecting public lands and protecting the environment, they're not directed at the environment. And I talked about this last time. They're directed at the protection of the human. The earth is going to far outlast us, right? We may not last on the earth if we keep going about our business. So think about it like that. But when you go down to the mesocycle of energy, right? So what are we talking about? I'm not talking about bringing in a feng shui expert to make sure that you got a rooster on your shelf, which maybe that's good for you. I don't know. But again, what are we looking for in a home? It's one of Maslow's basically fundamental needs, right? You need basically shelter. You need security. You need safety. That's what you're looking for in a home, right? For the most part. And some people aren't lucky enough to have that in a home, or they live in an area where it doesn't even matter if your home's that secure and you got bars on the road, it's still not safe. But if you don't have safety in your home or a sense of security, you're always on high alert. You're always in a little bit of fight or flight response. And obviously we know that that's going to wreck your health. If you are in a home filled with people, so talking about micro-environment, if you're in a home filled with people that are combative and abusive and angry, not going to be great for your health. If you're in a house that has, it's in a high rise in the middle of Chicago and south side of Chicago, sorry White Sox fans, probably not the greatest environment, right? So what are we trying to do is we go through, this is where that idea of like biomimicry comes up, right? We should be building houses in the landscape with natural materials. We should be eco-savvy, aware of the purchases we make from large corporations, aware of the stuff that we're using, the things we're buying, because the consumer is changing at large. Government, the environment, and everybody else's life one purchase at a time. Like, we're a huge, not capitalist country anymore. It's a capitalist world. If you don't believe that, like, wake up, right? And the way that we can change stuff is through purchases, through choices. Raising awareness is fantastic, right? Like, that's kind of what I'm doing on this video. What we got to realize is raising awareness doesn't do anything if you don't do anything with the awareness, right? People joke about it all the time, like, raising funds for cancer awareness. Well, fantastic, you're aware of it. Now what are you going to do about it? Right? You have to do something. So I said we were going to talk about like the personal aspect of this, but just think of, okay, I've got poor air quality in my house. What could I suffer from? We talked about all this stuff. Fatigue, headaches, lethargy. So now I don't want to do the things. I don't want to go exercise. My overall emotional state may be depressed. If my water's poor, now I'm truly affecting my health. I may end up with heavy metal toxicity. I may be getting weird xenoestrogen in my system and throw off my cycle. I may have fertility issues. If my light offs, again, who knows if I'm not depressed because the crappy lighting that I work in at my office all day, and then I go home, and maybe you live in someplace like I did in Alaska. Like when you went to the gym in Alaska, they had to have basically faux UV lights. So when you went in the gym, you actually woke up a little bit and were perky. The land, right? I can't imagine. I mean, everybody's got their thing. I can't imagine that somebody would much rather live in a giant concrete building with no plants and no landscape around, rather than a home that's built into the landscape with the natural flora and fauna around that house, so it actually looks like it should look in that area, rather than you could put your house in Colorado or California and it doesn't matter because you cut down all the trees and took away all the animals. It doesn't make sense to me. I don't know. And then we talked about the energy aspect. But what you guys got to realize is a lot of health, like when somebody comes into me, it's about us, right? So it's this. All right? And I feel like a third grade school teacher going through science class, but just bear with me here. When we focus on us, right, and we're guilty of this, like we want to know, how do I get better? How do I get out of pain? What supplements do I need to take? What should my diet be? That's fantastic, but okay, so now take 1 billion, just 1 billion. So that's 1/7 of the human population right now. Take 1 billion people that are all thinking like that. That's more than the population of the US. Obviously, I think we're around 300 million now or something. So take just the American population. you get a populace of people with fairly large disposable income. So we're basically directing what's happening in the marketplace based on what we want to do with our own personal health and our own personal lives. Because you know this, whether you believe it or not or act on it, your health determines the quality of your life. One big aspect of it. So if you're not healthy and you got all the money in the world, good luck, you're probably going to be dead. If you're as healthy as a horse and you have no money, I'm telling you, good luck. Like, you can be Gandhi or you can be Buddha or Siddhartha and go sit under a tree. This may upset some people. You probably don't agree with me. This is what I think. Like, health plus financial freedom is a big deal in our world nowadays. When you have financial freedom, like I said, your choices are a big part of what shapes the reality around us, right? If you go purchase something from a company that you know is cross-cutting forests in South America, or putting some sort of, whatever it is, chemical, or, they're putting, whatever it is, Monsanto, I don't care what company you pick. Like, if you know that their best interest is a corporation, because a corporation is just like a giant person, right? It's like an entity. So if you know that corporation isn't looking out for the environment, that means they're not really looking out for you, but you're going about your fun little business because you're like, I feel better. You can only feel better on the microcycle so long as a human if the other stuff starts going the other way, right? So you could work out every day, take all your supplements. If your house has crappy air quality, crappy water quality, crappy light, you have an argumentative spouse, good luck. It doesn't matter. If you got great personal health, you live in an awesome home, you got all the money in the world, and the environment keeps getting worse at large, the temperature keeps increasing, water table's going up, we get more natural disasters, what's it matter, right? But nobody looks at, it's either one or the other in our world. We're just big, basically polarized people, right? So we got the gung-ho liberal agenda for the environment, right? And if you're for the environment, you can't be for the small person, right? You, give up everything for the environment. And then you got your basically human evolutionists, right? Survival of the fittest. We want, if the top 1%, don't tax the 1%, all this stuff. I want to do everything for me. It doesn't work. You got to have a combination of that. And this isn't a political statement. This isn't anything but the way that I really think, the only way I think it'll work. And a lot of disagreement. This is open to conversation, but we gotta change the mindset. It's a perspective thing, guys. So we see individuals for health. The first question we ask is, what's your environment like? What's your sleep like? What's your nutrition like? What's your family life like? What's your friends like? Those are a big deal. And then if we could, say there were 3 farms, we'd have to start talking about, what's the environment of Birmingham like, right? Birmingham used to be the second most polluted city in the U.S. It's not anymore, right? What they started doing, making companies and businesses plant trees where they went, and the government planted trees and things like this, and created businesses around waterways instead of cutting through them. Again, I'm just kind of preaching probably to the choir. We got a lot of smart people listening to this and watching this, but just be smart about it, guys. And let me back up here. Ryan asked the question, where do you get the majority of water you personally drink? So we actually so in the office, the water we drink comes from Sprouts. So Sprouts has a filtration system outside of the grocery store there. That's a UV filtered reverse osmosis filter system. So what do you get in net neutral water? What are we doing? We're usually, and not all the time, we're putting some sea salt in there, or believe it or not, shaking your water up in a glass bottle outside kind of catalyzes a little reaction. There's a website called findaspring.com, I believe, findaspring.com. They need an app if anybody's listening out there. But you can find natural springs, and there's 2 or 3 in Alabama, and then a really good company that basically provides high quality water from natural springs is Mountain Valley Spring Water. So they have carbonated water, they have mineral water, they got spring water. It's in a glass bottle. You can get it at all health food stores, some like Walmarts and Publix and stuff too. But yeah, that's where we get our water from. I'll try to put some stuff on here, Ryan, about the EMR, EFR stuff, radiation. I'm gonna kind of scroll through here. If you guys have any questions, let me know. I know this is a little bit different than what I usually talk about, but if I didn't talk about this stuff, I don't think I should talk about anything, because this is so important. And I could talk to you guys all day about how to be able to touch your toes, how to get your hamstring flexibility, your nutrition, all that stuff. It does not matter at the end of the day if we don't literally take care of our house. And our house is our body, our home, and then where that home is, which is the earth. And I mean, I got stuff I need to get better at every day, right? But if you think this stuff is an issue and you're not acting on it, like big, like, shame on you, man. What are you doing? Like, change stuff. Don't just keep going about your business, right? And I know it's hard, and it's hard to, break a habit, make a new habit, but that's what we got to do nowadays. And if that's your personal health first, right? I always say it's hard to have an impact on a larger scale if you can't even like get up off the couch and walk 5 steps without getting out of breath. You got to fix yourself first, right? Just like you gotta put money into the bank to be able to give back to others, right? So I gotta eat well, I gotta do my exercise, I gotta educate myself so I can give back to you guys. You have to do the same thing before you go out there and have an impact, whether that's on the people around you, your meso environment, or macro, the world at large. So I guess go get after it, Mother Teresa style, right? I don't know if there's any questions. Super random video. I hope you guys liked it. I don't know, a little off topic from what I usually speak about. Next time we're going to talk about how we can really change this stuff. Like, what are the steps that are going to keep us from de-evolving, or if we're changing, where do we think this should go, and what is the best route to take? So as always, question everything, find your truth. See you guys next time.